A tall, dark-haired woman wearing a dark countenance appeared from the shadows. She then wordlessly stepped out and kneeled in front of Michael. "Thank you, Alpha." And at that moment, the Shadow Knight released a wave of pressure as its entire body tensed. Its ghastly red eyes underneath its helm flashed fervidly as it stared at this newcomer. There was something within the Unity clone that seemed to have garnered the ire of this soulless piece of diva. In the next instant, the Shadow Knight disappeared from everyone's sight. Before anyone could react, he and Alpha reappeared in the center of the convoluted staircases, their fists crashing together and creating a thunderous collision that shattered the very ground they stood on. This confrontation sent the entire castle trembling erratically. "What?" Platinum couldn't believe his eyes. This placid, taciturn woman was able to react and withstand the Grandmaster's diva head-on. Sure, it was only a small sliver of the true thing, but the fact that it even remained unharmed was a terrifying revelation. Was this woman another nascent spirit cultivator? Where did she come from? Just then, the two reticent figures disappeared and reappeared up in the air, with the knight having performed an uppercut while Alpha defended with her hands. Before the booming tremble of their clash reached Michael and Platinum, the two disappeared again and reappeared in another spot, having engaged in an equal brawl. This happened multiple more times in the span of a second, each one ending up in a neutral position where neither was winning or losing. This was even more surprising to Platinum. The Shadow Knight was the Grandmaster's diva. It inherited his unbeatable fighting style, albeit a little bit more basic. Yet Alpha was fighting with it head-on, giving no ground against the Shadow Diva. With a final clash, the two separated, each with their backs against the wall. The Shadow Knight looked down on the ground, seeing its own shadow elongated along the spiraling staircase. With its hand, it reached down into its own shadow and grabbed it from the ground, turning it corporeal. His shadow morphed into the shape of an estoc, a two-handed edgeless sword with a pointed tip. With this new weapon in hand, the Shadow Knight lunged at Alpha, blurring and leaving no trace of itself behind. The Unity clone tried to move, but found its feet fettered by its own shadow. Unbeknownst to her, the Shadow Knight had used its ability power. With her feet tied, Alpha bent her back, with the estoc barely grazing past her head. The Shadow clone returned to its position, having readied another thrust. But just as it was about to lunge forwards, it suddenly lurched forwards, its armored face falling headfirst into the ground. It immediately looked to its feet, seeing a similar shadow manacle binding its feet to the ground. What? That's Grandmaster's ability power. Platinum was shell-shocked to see Alpha using the same techniques as the Shadow Diva. How could this unknown woman suddenly manifest the same power as the Grandmaster? This was no coincidence. After all, this was the first time that Alpha had shown any type of ability power at all. Before Platinum could get answers to his question, and before the Shadow Diva unfettered itself from the manacles, Alpha extended her hand and grabbed at seemingly nothing in the air. And at that moment, the drone shimmered into existence. Its invisibility dropped and its shadow now forming on the ground. Alpha wrenched the drone's shadow, holding its corporeal form in her hands. With a single command, the amorphous gaseous shadow began to condense and form into an object that fit squarely in her hand. To Platinum and the Shadow Diva's piercing red eyes, this object was completely unknown. But anyone from the modern world would know it immediately. It was a handgun. A prismatic light emanated out of the handgun's barrel, before a beam of unity shot out and hit the Shadow Diva's helm, perfectly squeezing its way through the slits in its helm. The Shadow Diva staggered for a second, before its shadowy figure became even more fuzzy than before. Stygian, gaseous mist flowed out of the knight's body, its corporeal form starting to become translucent as it lost its energy. Right before Platinum's eyes, the Shadow Knight diva that he'd been so proud of suddenly dissipated into nothingness. The oppressing aura of a nascent spirit cultivator diminished, finally allowing Michael to breathe a sigh of relief. Alpha, having done its job, turned back towards Michael and curtsied. Without another word, she descended back into the shadows. Wah! Wah! Speechless, Platinum felt his whole world turning upside down. All the energy, excitement, and vigor inside him drained out with the blood. He fell back on the ground, his face as pale as a ghost. Michael suddenly appeared from the corner of Platinum's disappearing vision. "Thanks for the info." Those were the last words Platinum heard before a Unity saber pierced through his skull, ending the fight. Michael, having survived an encounter with a nascent spirit diva, plopped into the ground with his limbs sprawled. Then he heard the sound of footfalls echoing in the room. He turned his head, seeing Katarina standing there with an awed look at her face. Katarina took in everything in sight. She saw Platinum's dead, the hole in his skull still smoking as part of his brain turned mush. Then, her eyes gazed at the golden pendant on the ground, with the pieces of shattered midnight gems still spread everywhere. She knew what had happened. Platinum had died, even as a nascent spirit diva protected him from harm. Then she looked towards Michael, who was hurt, but looked largely unaffected by the whole ordeal. She didn't have to be a genius to figure out what happened. In fact, she'd have to be a dunce not to connect the pieces. But she just couldn't comprehend it. How could Kyo have defeated a half-step 9th stage body formation magnetic and a nascent spirit diva at the same time? In the body formation realm, a magnetic strives to create a corporeal form for their diva. And once they achieve that, they would be able to manifest them outside of their own psyche, becoming an indomitable armor that grants its user solidified ability power. In the nascent spirit realm, a cultivator must now form their diva's spirit. This was their soul. Most cultivators keep this spirit deep in their own psyches, hoarding it until they form a full soul for their diva, thereby ascending to godhood. But nascent spirit cultivators could also choose to bifurcate this soul, leaving it behind an item like that midnight. This would allow their diva to briefly manifest in another location away from the magnetic. Most people called that a nascent piece. Katarina never thought that the Platinum of this stronghold had a nascent piece in his arsenal. If she knew, she would have never allowed Kyo and Lady Farron to go into the castle alone. Although this nascent piece was only a fragment of the real thing, a tiny slice of a ginormous pie, it still contained genuine nascent spirit power. It was not something that even a half-step 9th stage body formation cultivator could ever hope to defeat. But somehow this golden-haired boy did it. Against all odds, he deprived them of a valuable Platinum leader and his stronghold. Not only that, but he achieved something that even Katarina was not able to do. He was able to injure the Grandmaster. After all, although that nascent piece was bifurcated from its magnetic, it was still inextricably linked to its owner. It was still a limb in its body. Its death would bring unimaginable pain and suffering to its magnetic. It would be akin to feeling your mind and heart get struck with millions of needles while simultaneously getting sliced apart into pieces. The loss of a nascent piece was even greater than losing a piece of limb. This was their soul. Grandmaster was losing a vital part of his soul. Katarina could only lament the fact that she couldn't see that heinous bastard's face as he felt the repercussions of losing one of his nascent spirits. He must be clutching his chest in his tall ivory tower, his face filled with confusion and anger. His frustrations would only continue here on as he learns that one of his strongholds was unceremoniously sieged deep into the night, leaving no survivors at all. And to think that they had originally thought they'd succeeded in their plans. They successfully brought chaos and destruction in the elven village, stole its most powerful mithril weapon, and got away with it without anyone even knowing. This would have been a crucial step in their plans. But then, in the span of a few minutes, everything turned into a fiasco of disastrous proportions. Katarina felt extremely jubilated. Who would have thought that their greatest victory would come from a boy who didn't even know the war he was fighting? "I'm dead tired," Michael muttered, his body sprawled on the floor. "You could have died," she said, half awed and half reprimanding. A nascent piece is not something that even cultivators in our realm can easily deal with. Michael pushed himself off the ground, arching his back in pain. "That's because I didn't know anything. You didn't tell me about Platinum or that nascent piece you're talking about." Katarina turned silent, agreeing with his words. When they arrived in the stronghold, She only told them to take Lyra and escape as soon as possible without fighting anyone. She never told them why. "Are you going to tell me about this organization now?" Michael demanded. "After all this, I think I deserve to know." She pursed her lips, still undecided on the whole situation. There was a reason why they kept everything tightly sealed. This was forbidden knowledge. If they began spreading information about them to anyone who would listen, they would suddenly wake up to see bodies littering the floor. After all, they were dealing with extremely powerful people, people who were on the brink of achieving godhood themselves. Telling Michael of everything would get him killed, or maybe put him into a path of something much worse. In Katerina's eyes, he would be much better off ignorant about the underbelly of the world. But seeing the look in his eyes, she had a feeling that he would only be pushing himself into the darkness, whether she told him or not. And at that point, letting him go in blind would only assure his death. But if she led him and guided his way, there was a very small chance that his unique capabilities could ultimately end up helping them win the war against the darkness. He'd already shown that tonight. "Dad, is this why you chose him as your protégé?" Perhaps the professor saw something within the kid, and in a moment of prescience, realized that he was the key that they needed to finally turn the tides of battle. Katerina took a deep breath, a pensive countenance written on her face, before she finally nodded. "Okay, I'll tell you what you need to know. Let me introduce myself properly for once. My name is Katerina Petrovich, and I am the only daughter of the great Grunwald Liechtenstein," she said with pride. This was the first time Michael heard of the professor's real name. He thought Liechtenstein was his first name, not his last. But why is her last name Petrovich and not Liechtenstein? Since this wasn't really relevant to the mystery of their organization, Michael decided to reserve this question for himself. He was much more interested to know about where they came from. "We are a part of an organization called the Eternatus Consortium, a gathering of like-minded people with the express intent to save the world from the ruinous ideology of those who want to bring down the apocalypse. We only exist to do one thing: destroy the ersatz and their cataclysmic doctrine." "The ersatz?" Katerina nodded. "They are a group of savages that disregard the sanctity of life and the world. They brutalize the natural order and think that they can create something better on their own. They believe that the ancient era is nothing but a footnote in the history of the world. They believe that it's outdated, no longer useful or pertinent in these modern times." Michael tilted his head, confused. Upon first impressions, the ersatz didn't look really all that bad. The fact that they don't like the ancient era for some reason didn't mean that they were evil. "So they don't like history? You don't understand. They disdain anything that relates to the ancient era. They want to erase it from our past and build something anew. Take the Godforge pieces, for example. As you may or may not know, the Godforge pieces were once a solid object, a mythical hunk of metal that brought peace, prosperity, and power into the ancient world. This was a prominent source of power for the ancient humans. It's what gave them the otherworldly strength that could shift reality itself. They didn't need to surgically insert a Godforge piece in their hearts to use ability power. It was already inherent to them thanks to the Godforge. The Eternatus Consortium aims to rebuild that monument. We want to regain the natural power that all life on Earth should have as their birthright. But the ersatz have other plans. They don't just intend to stop the reconstruction of the Godforge. They intend to destroy it entirely. They want to strip it of its power. Michael didn't understand that. Why would ersatz want to destroy the very thing that gave them powers? But then he remembered. The artifice. Katerina nodded. That's right. They wish to destroy the Godforge and replace it with their own creation. The artifice. Michael raised his eyebrows.
Creation?
You mean they created the artifice? He couldn't believe that. He always wondered how they got a hold of the artifice, seeing as no one had ever heard of it before. But as it turned out, they didn't discover it from a buried tomb or an underground tunnel. They created it themselves. This revelation brought a moment of realization for Michael. He finally understood why he felt something so unnatural within the artifice when he first saw it. Unlike the Godforge pieces, which exuded a natural, mythical power that seemed to come from nature itself, The artifice was the exact opposite. It was cold, lifeless, and disconnected from everything in reality. We do not know how, but someone called the artificer was able to create an object that could replace the God-forged pieces in a magnetic's heart. It could grant them ability powers that looked no different from the real one. They intend to replace the God-forged pieces with the artifice, letting that relic from the ancient era become obsolete. In a superficial sense, this looked like a noble cause. Since God-forged pieces were extremely scarce, only a select group of people with the wherewithal to amass millions upon millions of sand dollars could use its reality-changing powers. Conversely, since the artifice was something that they created themselves, they could theoretically produce as much as they wanted, even to the point where every single human being on the planet became a magnetic. This looked like a win-win scenario for everyone. Except for one crucial detail regarding the artifice: the side effects. The artifice goes against the natural rules of the world. It is an abomination that should have never been made in the first place. Because of that, it is discordant to nature. Our own hearts treat it as something repugnant, something that should be expelled by any means necessary. That's why anyone who carries an artifice would eventually succumb to the death of their own hearts. That's why those hooded figures had cold hearts, Michael realized. When he first saw the artifice, he immediately noticed its lack of warmth. It emitted a cold frost that seemed to turn the magnetic into an undead zombie. And as it turns out, he was right. The artifice was killing them, albeit slowly. Then, she gestured to the tens of magnetics lying on the ground in a pool of their own blood. These hooded figures that you see lying before you, do not feel sorry for their deaths. They had already killed themselves long before you arrived. Due to the power of the artifice, those magnetics will still live and breathe like a normal human. But do not be mistaken. They are no longer human. They are simply a gathering of soulless, moving chunks of flesh that are neither alive nor dead. They are entirely reliant on the artifice to live. Without it, they will die. And with it, they will remain an abomination. Michael finally understood the pure hatred and vitriol that he felt for these hooded figures when he first saw them. It was his natural instincts as a human telling him feeling repugnant of something that shouldn't exist in nature. How could they stomach becoming a monster like this? Michael asked. He couldn't understand why they would sell their own soul for a piece of power. The ersatz believe that the artifice is the key to the future. They say that it's our next form of evolution, a version of the humans that will become even better than the ancient ones. They are so adamant in this doctrine that they are willing to conquer the world for it to become acceptable. They know the backlash against the artifice, but they do not care. If they had the world on the palm of their hands, who would stop them from forcing humans to submit to their ideology? That's why our work is important. The Eternatus Consortium will do everything in our power to stop their advances. But it is an uphill battle. Each day, the ersatz grow their army at a commensurate rate. They sacrifice humans in order to make magnetic soldiers who would do everything they told them to do. That's why we need your help. Join us, Kyo. Michael was a tad bit surprised after hearing her proposition. It wasn't just a few minutes ago where she refused to tell him anything about their secret organization. What will I get if I join? In his perspective, there wasn't really any benefit in joining a super-secretive organization with a vendetta against another super-secretive organization. It was the same reason why he didn't join the Guild of Arcana when Cerberus invited him some time ago. He valued his freedom too much. And seeing as how it took him besieging an entire stronghold for Katerina to finally tell him the truth, he had a feeling that his freedom of speech would be more than curtailed in this organization. Let me guess. I'll have to swear by some oath never to tell anyone about it? Katerina's silence was an implicit admission. He'd be doing more than just keep his mouth shut about the things in the Eternatus Consortium. He'd also have to go on missions mandated by their authority, either spying on a potential stronghold or sieging one with their army. Of course, there were a lot of benefits in joining the consortium. For example, all of his cultivation resources would be paid and accommodated for by the organization. He'd be lavishly given all the God-forged pieces he needed if he showed himself as a worthy talent. Not only that, but the Eternatus Consortium had a vast connection of people all around the globe. If he were to join, he would get access to everything they had, including the forbidden knowledge, esoteric texts, and everything else in between. If he needed to get inside an impenetrable or restricted room, there was always an agent on standby that would allow them that access if needed be. Unfortunately, those connections couldn't be used to live an opulent life. They couldn't sumptuously use organization funds to purchase something that didn't directly correlate to their goal of defeating the ersatz. Because of that, the Eternatus Consortium was best for people with an inexorable zeal to protect the world. This was the reason why Professor Lichtenstein was attracted to the organization in the first place. They had a mutual enthusiasm to protect the ancient era from those who wished to destroy it from the history books. In short, if one didn't have an ardent or fervent loyalty to their cause, then they weren't the right fit to become a part of Eternatus. Kyo didn't seem like the type. "I feel like we'll need you more than you need us," Katerina confessed. She still remembered the strange, flying metal saucer that seemed to disappear and reappear at will, and how it could fly faster than even the fastest eagles. Then she remembered the compound bow. He seemed to imply that he had more of those mythical weapons on hand, which was unbelievable in and of itself. That alone would have made Kyo a point of interest to the Eternatus Consortium below only that of the professor himself. And add in to the fact that he defeated a platinum-level magnetic and a nascent spirit piece all by himself, well, suffice it to say, they'd be the one doing the begging to have him join. "But perhaps you don't have to join," she added. "What do you mean?" "What I mean is that you'll be a secret, honorary member of the Eternatus Consortium mandated on my behalf." Michael leaned in, interested. "This means that you'll be able to participate in our organization's missions in a less direct approach. From the shadows. No one, not even those in our organization, will know of your existence except for me. This would allow you to keep your freedom and your safety while we're engaged in a war against the ersatz." Michael rubbed his chin, deep thoughts running through his head. "So you want me to help you fight for free?" She was basically treating him as an intern. "That's the only way for you to keep your identity a secret. If you were to receive the benefits, then I'll have to officially log you into the records. You'll have to swear an oath at that point," she argued. But still, she was cognizant of the fact that this wasn't really all that fair to him. "What do you want?" A smile curved up on his mouth. "I know that you can't give me any Godforge pieces, but how about that?" He gestured towards the dead, hooded figures lying bloodless on the ground. "Their artifice. Give it to me," he demanded. This time she was surprised. After a second of thought, a concerned and slightly wary expression flashed on her face. "What are you going to do with them?" He waved off her concern. "Don't worry, I'm not going to use them on any humans. I just want to experiment on them." Katerina inwardly breathed a sigh of relief. Then, with a little bit of thought, acquiesced at his request. "All right, that can be arranged. Our organization is not above in getting our hands dirty to find out the enigmatic secrets of the artifice. Maybe you'll be able to make some headway where our scientists haven't. I can't give you the artifice from those I killed, but you can take the ones you've killed on your own. These 10 pawns and that platinum are your possession now." Katerina extended her hands, emanating a shockwave of tangible ability power. Then, she wrenched something from the air. Immediately, the dark, glassy, anthracite icebergs burst out of the ersatz guards' chests, sending chunks of bone and frosty viscera flying into the air. As soon as these artifices felt the presence of oxygen in the air, a predetermined set of reactions were suddenly activated. A reddish hue glowed from their core, pulsating with an increasing frequency. The black, tenebrous gas gathering at its edges became more and more solid as it showed signs of an eruption. But with a single snap of Katerina's hands, an even more powerful ability power seemingly cut the tension like a knife, dispersing the tenebrous black gas into nothingness. The artifice turned benign just like that. A pile of artifice landed on Michael's hands, each one as light as a feather. He didn't know how much these were equivalent to Godforge pieces, but it must be a lot. 10 of those magnetics were in the 3rd stage, while platinum was at the peak of the 9th stage, just a half step away from the nascent spirit realm. It was definitely enough to turn another Unity clone into a quasi-nascent spirit magnetic like Alpha. That was the main reason why he agreed to Katarina's proposal. Seeing as how Alpha was able to best even a nascent spirit piece, he knew from then on that he should focus on turning his other Unity clones into the same as her. If he were to encounter another one of those disembodied diva, which in his luck wasn't that far-fetched, then he'd feel a lot safer knowing that he could summon any one of his Unity clones and have them defeat the nascent piece. According to Katarina, the one he encountered was only a tiny sliver of the real thing. If he had encountered a much bigger piece, it was more than possible that Alpha would be the one in the ground right now. And if he encountered a true nascent spirit cultivator, his only chance of survival were those Unity clones. If not for defeating them, then for purchasing enough time for him to escape. Are there more of these guys in ersatz? Michael asked Katarina, gesturing at the dead, debonair man on the ground. She nodded. There are multiple levels in their organization. The ones that you saw here today populating the stronghold are simple pawns. They range from the first stage to the 8th stage of the body formation realm. Now once they reach the 9th stage, then they are eligible to become a platinum. So that wasn't his name but his title. Then how about Grandmaster? Katarina's eyes shifted imperceptibly as he mentioned that name. But with nary a change in expression or countenance, she continued on as if she was unaffected by the name. Grandmaster is a title meant for the strongest beings in ersatz, a realm just a wisp away from godhood. He is in the 9th stage of the nascent spirit realm. After hearing that, Michael couldn't help but thank his lucky stars. As it turned out, that shadowy night diva came not just from an ordinary nascent spirit cultivator, but one at its peak. Grandmaster was only a half-step away from breaking through to the next realm. Michael didn't even know there was a next realm. Even with all of his strengths and advantages, he was 100% certain that he wouldn't stand for even a second in an encounter against him. The gap was too large. He wouldn't know I defeated his nascent piece, would he? He asked with consternation. She shook her head. No need to worry. He won't know. You've killed the only witness. Nascent spirit pieces were connected to the main magnetic, but they couldn't communicate back to them. In each ersatz stronghold, you'll find only a single leader. In this case, the entire castle was led by a platinum. This is probably because this stronghold doesn't have that much of a significant value to their organization. Usually, strongholds are guarded by emeralds, diamonds, or even masters. According to Katarina, emeralds were nascent spirit cultivators in the 1st to the 3rd stage. Diamonds ranged from the 4th stage to the 6th stage, and masters from the 7th stage and onwards. Wait, I thought grandmasters were for cultivators in the 9th stage of the nascent spirit? She shook her head. Those in the 9th stage are considered as masters. But those in the peak of that realm are worthy to become grandmasters. Some say that the difference between the two are as massive as the difference between the body formation and the nascent spirit realm. In short, Michael should let go of any thoughts about dealing with the grandmaster. In fact, he should avoid ersatz strongholds entirely, at least until he also reached the nascent spirit realm. The more important the stronghold, the more powerful its protector? Michael tried to confirm. Yes, but make no mistake. The fact that only a platinum guarded this stronghold doesn't mean its significance is mild. Each stronghold destroyed is another wrench in their plans. Trust that they will feel the ramifications of what we've done today, of what you've done. It did give him comfort in knowing that the spread of artifice would be hindered because of today. But there was something that Platinum said that was still making him uneasy. Then, does that mean that the stronghold in New Sparta contains extreme importance for ersatz? Katarina furrowed her brows, her eyes shifting at the implication of his words. Before he died, Platinum said that he'd return to the Grandmaster's side in New Sparta. A huge gale of wind burst in front of Michael as Katarina rushed to his side. Is this true? Her eyes were burning with fervid hate and vitriol. Her diamond armor was subconsciously manifesting around her body, as if reacting to the intense emotions rumbling through in her mind. Michael furrowed his brows, realizing that the hate wasn't directed towards him. Her hateful eyes were unfocused and hazy, as if her mind was embroiled in her own emotions and memory. Katerina despised the ersatz, but not to this extent. The resentment she felt for this grandmaster was visceral. It was personal. After a few seconds, Katerina's emotions calmed, with the diamond armor around her body dissipating back into motes of light. She stepped back, mortified at her own outburst. "I'm sorry. He stopped her. "It's okay. I understand." With a nod, Katerina pursed her lips. "If Platinum is telling the truth, if he is in New Sparta, then this means that we're underestimating the importance of this place. I have to tell this to everyone." This information needed to be relayed with the utmost haste. She needed to tell them herself. But just then, they heard the sounds of hurried footfalls echoing through the chambers. Lady Farron came strutting into the room, her face filled with anxiety and consternation. In her hands was a little elf girl, with very short black hair, a scrappy and almost grungy set of clothes, and a permanent defiant expression on her face. It was Lyra. Michael had never seen her in person before, but he knew immediately that there was something wrong with her. The girl's face was pallid and insipid, with absolutely no color at all. A complete contrast to the lively and rambunctious child that he heard before. Not only that, but even with Lady Farron holding her close, the little girl was still breaking out in a cold sweat, shivering as if she was out on the dead night of winter. As the two elves got closer to them, Michael stepped forward, intending to try and help alleviate some of the girl's pain. But just as he did, a set of text passed by his vision, staggering him. "What's wrong with her?" Katerina asked hurriedly. I don't know. She just collapsed and started to shake. I think her curse is starting to return." Suddenly, Lyra clutched her own chest, her face twisting into pain. Lady Farron's fears had come true. Lyra's Tao heart had once again shown its fragility. It was no wonder. The traumatic experience of having been kidnapped by an unknown organization with seemingly no hope of getting out would have stressed even a normal heart, much more something that was already vulnerable. "Lay her down on the ground," Katerina implored. With the extensive history they had in the Eternatus Consortium, the curse of the Beastfolks was one thing that they had been researching deeply for some time. Everyone knew that the curse of the Tao heart was a death sentence, something that gave anyone a foreboding sense of mortality once its effects started to show. Once it was confirmed, there was basically no way of making a recovery. Most people blamed unfortunate luck, deplorable circumstances, or simply a freak genetic mutation that caused these curses. But Katerina knew differently. The curse of the Tao heart was simply a remnant of the ancient era. Lady Farron laid Lyra down into the ground, with the little girl immediately turning into a fetal position. "The curse of the Tao heart is due to the abundance of ability power in someone's heart," Katerina explained. "They are a manifestation of extreme talent, overwhelming nascent potential, and a hidden heritage that dates back to the ancient humans." Lady Farron frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means that Lyra is too powerful for her own body. Ability power is billowing inside her, causing her heart to insidiously inflate, almost making it burst at the seams. The curse of the Tao heart used to be a gift. It is the sign of a one-in-a-million talent that even the ancient humans worship as the pinnacle of strength. It is scarce, but there are doctrines portraying children with the curse of the Tao heart as the people who were all but guaranteed to transcend into godhood," Katerina revealed. This greatly shocked Lady Farron and the staggered Michael. The image that she was portraying was in complete contrast to the vulnerable and ghastly appearance of the little girl. How could someone on the brink of death also be the same one with the potential of ascending above the nascent spirit realm? "But fate is cruel," Katerina grimaced. "What was once a sign of divinity now became a mark of death. Gift turned curse. Those afflicted with this talent no longer have the proper resources needed to nurture them into maturity." With most of the ancient era texts turning decrepit due to the deteriorating effects of time, almost no one knew how to cure these curses. "But she recovered. Her Tao heart stopped deteriorating," Lady Farron begged. "She just needs to use the compound bow." Katerina pursed her lips before reaching out her hands and wrested something towards her. A second later, A rift in space appeared, showing a dark storage room filled with weapons and sundry treasures that this stronghold plundered throughout the years. An ornate golden chest inside suddenly started to rumble, before its lid blew wide open as an anachronistic compound bow flew out towards Katarina's hands. She held it for a brief second, before pushing it towards the little elf girl. Lady Farron's eyes became filled with hope. But as the seconds passed and Lyra's condition continued to worsen, her countenance started to turn weary and dreadful. "Why isn't it working?" Katarina sighed. "I'm sorry, but there is no cure to the curse. Whatever respite she felt must have only been temporary. It's not uncommon for cursed children to feel healthy and lively for a brief period of time before their conditions worsened." She wanted to say that no cursed child in recent history has yet to go above the age of 10, but decided not to worsen the mood anymore. After all, the only way for a cursed child to recover was through. "Wait," Michael said, stepping forward. He gestured for Katarina and Lady Farron to give him some space, and despite their confused faces, they acquiesced to his request. Then he kneeled next to Lyra. "Hey, can you hear me? You gotta follow my voice. Okay?" With both of his hands outstretched, Michael closed his eyes and focused on the power deep inside his soul, tapping into something intrinsic within himself. "What are you?" Katarina's words dropped off as she felt a change in the atmosphere. Light, almost ethereal aura penetrated throughout the room, even bypassing Katarina's natural nascent spirit defenses. It felt as if gravity itself had lessened, titans released. Her eyebrows furrowed. This wasn't ability power. This wasn't magic. It was something else entirely. Something divine. A prismatic light emanated from Michael's hands, its glow spreading towards the grimacing elven girl. But after being touched by this ethereal light, her expression lightened, relief coursing through her body. Michael heard ChatJK5's voice echoing in his mind. "Would you like to awaken Lyra's talent?" A few moments ago, Michael saw a notification he hadn't seen for a long time suddenly pop up in his vision. The golden nose detects the presence of someone with great talent. He hadn't seen that notification since the first creation of the nation of Reborn. If he remembered correctly, the last time this skill popped up was when he first met the Dragonborns. After that, it never showed up again, making him forget about it completely. But now, it suddenly popped up out of nowhere. His eyes immediately gazed at the room as he tried to find the source of that smell. But this was weird. The only people here were him, Katarina, and the two elves. At first, he thought that his skill was sensing someone in the vicinity of the stronghold, maybe someone who happened to pass by in a moment of pure serendipity. This was the reason why he was a little bit distracted while Katarina and Lady Farron talked about Lyra. But then, he suddenly heard something about the curse while he was in the middle of his reverie. The curse of the Tao heart is a manifestation of extreme talent. These few words brought him out of his daydream. Perhaps the golden nose was actually talking about the little elven girl in front of him. But that didn't make sense. After all, his second supreme talent, one for bestowing gifts and awakening talents to other people, only worked for humans and demi-humans. Beast folks were not in this category because they were under a completely different source of power. He couldn't awaken anyone from the mermen because their strengths rallied under the purview of the Ocean King. The vampires and werewolves, on the other hand, were being led by the Monster Queen. This was the same for the other beast folks, the Dragoconians and the elves as well. In short, those beast folks already awakened their talent. But after hearing the specialness of the curse of the Tao heart, Michael began to think that the golden nose had something to do with Lyra. With nothing to lose and everything to gain, Michael stepped forward and tried to awaken Lyra's innate talent. Lady Farron and Katarina stepped back, in complete awe and shock as a golden, ethereal light began to encompass Lyra's entire body. This tangible, out-of-this-world power began to pick her up, making her float into the air. Somehow, this strange power was able to quell the degenerative curse in Lyra's heart. Inside her body, the intense, fervid power of her innate talent was trying to break out of her own heart. This led to the deterioration of its walls and muscles, to the point where her heart's lining was only a thin layer away from rupturing completely. But somehow, this new golden light was able to enclose the unbridled energy coming from Lyra's soul, taming it and forming it into something with a little bit more structure, more organization. The golden light became a guiding tunnel, allowing the rampant ability power in her heart to focus all of its vivacity to empower her body instead. With this didactic, ethereal, golden power, Lyra's curse suddenly transfigured into a different substance. No, this wasn't sudden. It was as if the golden light that got infused inside her heart awakened something that was already latent within the curse. It was as if a switch had been turned, turning the curse from a festering, destructive solid force into a panacea-like liquid that began to repair and reconstruct all of the damage that it had been doing after all this time. All of them watched as Lyra's face softened, her pallid face slowly having more color of vividness than before. Not only that, but the ability power emanating from her body was gargantuan, almost godlike, to the point where she had a mien of an ethereal goddess descended from the heavens as she floated in the air effused by a golden light. What's happening to her? Lady Farron asked out loud, both confused and awed. Katerina opened her mouth, about to say something, but even she couldn't bring herself to bring out the words. After all, she knew exactly what was happening. It has been written in the texts. The golden ethereal light, the divine-like power, and the gargantuan density of ability threads coursing through the elf's veins. Everything pointed to the fact that Lyra was currently awakening her latent talent. But that was thought of to be impossible. The power to awaken a cursed Dao heart was long lost during the great cataclysmic event that separated the ancient era from the modern one. When the ancient humans disappeared, so did humanity's ability to wield all 8 elemental mana along with it. Thanks to the retrieval of the Godforge pieces, humanity was able to somehow regain their ability powers. But even now, no one had ever been born with the mythical prismatic talent. And according to the ancient texts, only someone with the ability to wield unity could transform the curse of the Dao heart into a gift. Katerina stared at the golden-haired boy in front of her, her eyes gazing at the prismatic light coming from his palms. That was unmistakable. That was unity. And like an explosion going through her head, all of the disparate clues started to finally coalesce into one single truth. The truth as to why and how her father activated his failsafe. He figured out that his protégé, his student Kyo, was none other than the mythical talent only talked about in the legends. He wielded unity. Just then, the golden light surrounding Lyra finally subsided. Slowly, she floated back down on the ground, landing squarely on her feet. She opened her eyes, showing a new sense of power, clarity, and peacefulness in her gaze. The little elven girl had changed for the better. She looked down at her own chest, no longer feeling that piercing pain in her heart. It was gone, replaced by an effervescent power brimming to the surface, giving her energy and vigor unlike anything she'd felt before. She knew then and there that she was finally cured. The platinum-led ersatz stronghold, which hadn't seen the light of day in years, had now been blown wide open thanks to a motley group of 3 people who had a particular set of skills perfectly suited to rescue a little elven girl. Just a few minutes after that its rampart walls had been broken down. There were already hundreds of people wearing sun masks entering the entire palace. Katerina had sent a private message back to the Eternatus Consortium telling them about the successful assault against an ersatz stronghold. At this point, Michael, Lady Farron, and Lyra were already out of the castle's walls and were on their way to return to New Sparta. And while Lyra was entertaining herself with the amazing, futuristic technology inside the drone's control room, Michael instead focused on a single screen depicting the fading view of the stronghold. "So that's the Eternatus Consortium," he muttered. The members of this secretive organization donned a complete white attire in contrast to the dark outfits that the ersatz assassins wore. And unlike those hooded figures, members of the consortium wore this elaborate and conspicuous sun mask with 8 distinct rays depicting the different mana elements. These people searched through the rubble, taking proper records of the deceased ersatz assassins lying on the ground. There was also no doubt in his mind that they were currently going through every single convoluted tunnel room inside the castle, hoping to disinter a few important relics and treasures that the ersatz deemed important. Phew. I'm glad I didn't join your consortium, or else I would have had to wear that awful white robe, Michael said sarcastically. According to his agreement with Katerina, Michael would become a secret member of the organization, with records of his identity never seeing the light of day. That was why they had to get out of there before the consortium agents arrived. Bro, you've been holding out on me. I should have had your flying weapons instead. Michael snapped out of his reverie once he realized that the little Lyra already had her hands on one of the mini drones. He was about to scold her, but stopped when he looked at the screen. One of the screens showed the first-person perspective of a mini drone gliding through the thick branches of the forest down below, doing flips, turns, and barrel rolls with absolute and consummate proficiency. He was so shocked that he stood there and gawked at the screen, while the sounds of furious button clicks and mashing echoed in the control room. Is this part of her monstrous talent? She was a prodigy when it came to technology. She was able to figure out how a phone and a drone worked in such a short amount of time. While Lyra was having fun, she was suddenly interrupted as Lady Farron lunged at her from behind, taking her into a breathtaking hug. Relief, shock, and a flurry of pent-up emotions broke out of her at this moment and almost turned her into a slobbering dog. Who? You made me worried there. Conversely, Lyra had an almost annoyed look plastered on her face. She tried to push Lady Farron away like a rebellious teen embarrassed of their own parents. You're overreacting. It's fine. I'm fine. Lyra insisted, a teardrop building up in her eyes. Can you really no longer feel that prick in your heart? It's gone, right? Yes, I told you that already. While the two elves were having a merry time celebrating this miraculous moment, Michael was distracted as he saw a woman appear on the screen. It was Katerina, flying in the air beside the drone. Can we talk? After Katerina finished up her report to the consortium agents, she immediately caught up to the drone for a one-on-one talk with Michael. Their conversation was fairly mild, talking about his supposed prismatic talent and other such things. You can really use all 8 elements? Yes. Is that so hard to believe? Her reaction was warranted. After all, the Eternitas Consortium focused all of their efforts on restoring the ancient era. And one of the things that was important in their objectives was to figure out how someone could wield unity. That was the reason why their emblem was a sun with 8 rays. It symbolized their hope of once again bringing all 8 elements into one, unifying force. It was one of their end goals. After all, according to Professor Lichtenstein's research, the only foreseeable way of returning unity into the hands of humanity was if the Godforge pieces were returned into one solid block. They would have never thought that someone had already achieved it. Michael decided to tell her the truth. He told her that he was born with this power, a latent skill that he had even before he awakened his talent. He briefly conjured 8 simple spells in the air, symbolizing his mastery in all of them. Amazing! It is an extraordinary stroke of luck that I happened to run into you. The unique powers you wield will help tremendously in our war against the ersatz. Kyo was only in the 7th stage of the body formation realm, but if he were to reach the nascent spirit realm, he stood a very good chance of fighting against emeralds, diamonds, and even masters. The fact that he reached this level while still being so young meant that he was more than likely than others to achieve a nascent spirit. In fact, by the rate he was going, he was even going to defeat Katerina's record of the youngest nascent spirit cultivator ever. Thanks, Michael said, scratching his head awkwardly. He never really knew what to do after being complimented. I will help you in any way I can. We need to break down every stronghold that we can in New Sparta. Katerina then explained that despite knowing that the Grandmaster had a stronghold in New Sparta, they couldn't exactly go in there, guns blazing, like they did the last time. First of all, they didn't even know where it was placed. Knowing him, the stealth and defenses they placed, there was something that even Katerina could break on her own. They'd need an entire army. Second of all, they'd be putting themselves and everyone else in danger if they didn't put in any planning for the siege. According to Katerina, it would be better to weaken their footing in New Sparta first. It would be like the famous saying, divide and conquer. With such an important strategic location, the ersatz wouldn't just put one single stronghold there and call it quits. No, they would supplement them by placing it amongst other strongholds that were held by leaders with a very strong defensive capability. Unfortunately, those strongholds wouldn't be defended by mere platinums. There would be a genuine nascent spirit cultivator waiting for them there, which was someone Michael wanted to avoid. And because of Michael's anonymity, he couldn't exactly be placed amongst the consortium's army as well. He'd have to work in the shadows, attacking the strongholds indirectly while their realm army sieged when the time was right. Michael was okay with that. In fact, that was what he wanted. After all, he wouldn't be risking his life fighting nascent spirit cultivators, while still gaining all of the loots that he would have had otherwise. In his agreement with Katarina, he deserved at least a few scraps of artifice or godforge pieces during the siege. This would help him strengthen himself until he could eventually transcend the body formation realm and go to the nascent spirit realm. As much as I would like to kill that bastard, I have to wait. You must get stronger first, Katarina said. Michael nodded. Sure. I'll also have my friends and allies help us when need be. She immediately shook her head. Adding civilians into the mix wouldn't be the best idea. I told you, this is a war of gargantuan proportions, but it must be fought with absolute silence. No one can know about it unless they absolutely had to. Even if they're magnetic, she interrupted him. If they don't know what they're fighting, they're basically just a simple dead weight. You'll be risking their lives without the proper setup. Of course, unless they're in the nascent spirit realm. Michael crossed his hands on his chest. I really think that the Dragonborns can help with this, he insisted. Katarina pursed her lips, before eventually shaking her head. This is a matter for the Eternatus Consortium. The more people involved, the harder it is to keep you a secret. Even if they can also use unity? Even if... Wait, you said what now? Michael shrugged. They can use unity. Her eyes went wide, in complete shock and disbelief. What? But I thought that you got your powers because of your birth. He nodded. Yeah, but they also awakened the power to wield all 8 elemental mana after I awakened their talents. In fact, everyone in the nation of Reborn can do it. After that revelation, Katarina simply couldn't take it anymore and had to get out of her drone to relieve all of her pent-up shock and stupefaction. It was as if she was looking at a completely different person. At first, she thought that her father picked Kyo up because of his extraordinary talent in history and whatnot. She even had a brief thought that he was an illegitimate child. But as it turned out, he was neither of those things. He was someone called Michael who owned the Reborn Company and its subsequent nation. And this group was no normal gathering of humans and demi-humans. Thanks to Michael's unique powers, they had all awakened the power to wield unity like him. As someone who was deeply entrenched into the lore and history of the ancient era, she knew just how big of a deal this was. One of the Eternatus Consortium's goals was to recover unity from the annals of history. They thought that if they could bring it back to the modern world, they'd be one step closer to recreating the ancient era. But who would have thought that a kid from a backwoods part of the royal continent was actually born with that specific power already awakened? If he could awaken anyone's talent and proficiency in unity, then he could basically recreate the ancient era all by himself. This was a revelation that was far too large and big of a scope to keep a secret. So, with Michael's permission, Katarina decided to tell one of the very top leaders of the consortium, the only person that she and her father trusted with everything in their lives. After Katarina left, Michael and the 2 elves returned to New Sparta. The village, which had been ravaged by fire, was now slowly recovering little by little. The gargantuan acacia trees glowed with these soft, gaseous green light as elves kneeling at the roots used their Tao heart to heal their guardians of their injuries. And in the middle of this serene recovery state, a giant metallic hovercraft suddenly descended from the heavens, its propellers bringing down gusts of heavy gales that ruffled the trees and the anxious hearts of all the elves. The question on all of their minds were soon answered as the drone landed on the open ground, and a small, short-haired elven girl reappeared beside it. It was Lyra, safe and sound. The little elven girl squirmed under the gazes of all her neighbors, the very people she tormented with pranks and all sorts of antics that warranted a little bit of anger towards her. She looked down, thinking that they'd be expressing their disappointment at her return. But just as she was about to say something, a furious, tumultuous roar of jubilation and exultation rang out in the elven village. Lyra looked around warily, wondering why they were suddenly celebrating something. But then, the elves started to crowd around her, warily checking if she had any bruises or injuries. It wasn't until Lady Farron exited out of the drone did the rest of the elves turn their focus onto her. "What happened, Lady Farron? Thank the earth Lyra was all right. Did you catch those no-gooders? Wait, stop crowding around them. You're stressing Lyra out." Lady Farron looked around at the villagers and gave them a reassuring smile. "I will explain everything in due time," she said calmly. "But for now, let us rest and give time to heal. For tomorrow, there will be many celebrations to do." The next day, Michael woke up to find the sun blaring its rays through the windows of his room. He sluggishly got up out of the bed the elves accommodated for him and looked out the window. The first thing he noticed was the bright orange skyline hanging above the entire village. As it turned out, he slept through the entire morning and only awoke in the afternoon. "How long did I sleep?" 16 hours. That was perhaps the best sleep he's ever had in a long time. But of course, that's to be expected after what happened last night. The whole thing went like a blur for him. His adrenaline pumped through his body for the entirety of their siege in the stronghold and only wore out once he was back in bed. Let's see. We breached the stronghold. I defeated Platinum and a nascent piece, rescued Lyra, awakened her talent, and revealed my true identity to Katarina. He certainly did a lot yesterday. After taking a big stretch, he decided to go out of his room and meet up with Lady Farron. He exited the room, went down the elevator vines, and landed back down on the building's lobby. And as soon as his foot touched the ground with an audible thud, hundreds of elves turned towards his direction. He stopped in his tracks, staggered by the amount of people in the room. The lobby wasn't this populated back then. The weird part was that every single one of the elves were silent as they looked at him. He could feel a pin drop. They gawked at him with a mix of awe, shock, and bewilderment. Then, a couple of moments later, all hell broke loose. "Sir Keo, you are a hero to all elven kind. I really admire you, Sir Keo. Please leave your hand imprint in my bow. Can I touch your golden hair?" Michael backed away at the surge of fanatic elves besieging him from all sides. He was very much confused by all of this. He was quite known within the elven community because of his involvement with Lady Farron, but not to this extent. Overnight, he practically became a celebrity within the village, paparazzi and all. Cornered back into the elevator vines, he suddenly heard a whisper echo from the top. "PSSST. Bro." He looked up, only to see the familiar image of an elven child clinging onto a vine high up on the tree. Except this time, the image was clear. It was Lyra. "Come on. I know a way out," she said, gesturing for him to follow her. Michael shrugged and followed after her, floating through the vines until he finally reached a small crawlway tunnel that led him outside the tree and out into the open. He stepped out of the tree, finding himself perched atop a thin branch high up in the gargantuan acacia tree, overlooking a vista of the whole elven village. On the end of this branch was Lyra, sitting down precariously at the bending branch, hugging her knees as she solemnly looked at all the activity down below. Michael sat beside her and looked down. There, he saw a slew of colorful powder spewing everywhere as elves mindlessly shot arrow after arrow at the confetti fruits in the trees. The familiar sounds of harmonizing zither and violins beautifully echoed throughout the entire village, played by elves using their bows as musical instruments. The whole forest was in a festive mood, no doubt. "What happened?" he asked Lyra. And so, the little girl relayed to him about the events that transpired early in the day. According to her, Lady Farron awoke everyone in the village and gathered all the elves under one roof. There, she told the heroic story of how he rescued her and Lyra from certain doom. She may have added a few touches of dramatized retelling of the story, but the important scenes were there. This included the part where he gave Lady Farron another compound bow, the part where he defeated her captor, and the part where he saved Lyra from her cursed Dow heart. After hearing all of this laid out, Michael finally understood all the fanfare he got from the elves. But what he couldn't understand was why Lyra didn't seem all that happy given that she was finally free from her curse. "You look sad." She shrugged. "I'm not. I just feel." Her words trailed off. After hearing that her death was inexorable for all of her life, it was a strange thing to suddenly hear that she was finally cured of everything. It was hard to believe even. She had no idea how to properly process what she was feeling. It was a lot to go through, especially for a young girl like her. And the worst part was that she was all alone. She might have had the support of Lady Farron and all the elves in the village, but they would never truly understand what she was going through. This was quite a lonely place to be. Michael, knowing that he could do nothing to alleviate this loneliness, sat next to Lyra. "Give me your phone," he said. The little elf girl glared at him. "You won't take it away, would you? I earned it fair and square." He chuckled. "No, of course not." After glaring at him with disbelief, Lyra eventually relented and gave him the phone. Once he had it, he inputted a few commands in the phone before giving it back to her. "What did you do?" she asked him. Michael smiled. "I gave you the number of someone whom you'll find a lot of similarity with." Meanwhile, in a room cut away from the world, with no windows or doors, no end nor beginning, stood an old woman wearing a buttoned-down white robe. Despite her balled-up hair showing grayish and white tones, the old woman looked stately and solemn, as if her very presence demanded respect and adoration. She had a mien of a queen, similar to that of the Duchess Regina, but with a hint of mystery and depth that gave her a sharpness that should make anyone wary of crossing her. She stood in the room patiently, waiting for something, or someone. Finally, a rift in space appeared right in front of her, the fraying edges of the crack becoming crystallized with calcified diamonds with multiple facets that reflected prismatic light. Then, a young, black-haired woman stepped inside. This was none other than Katerina Petrovich. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," Katerina bowed, showing this old woman the obeisance she needed. After all, this dignified and majestic woman was the leader of the Eternatus Consortium itself. She was a busy woman, and even Katerina's stature as a nascent spirit realm cultivator wouldn't have been enough to suddenly request a private meeting out of the blue. "Oh, please, Catty. No need for that formality," the old woman said warmly, shaking her hand. "You make it seem as if we haven't known each other all your life." Katerina knew this woman since her birth. She was the one who nurtured her into the woman that she was now. Her entire life would have been different if it weren't for her timely guidance during a very troubling period of her life. When her parents weren't around, she was there, giving her all the maternal love she needed. In fact, their countenance towards each other would have been more warm and affectionate if it weren't for the purpose of today's meeting. This gathering wasn't centered on family members catching up. It was between a member of Eternatus and its leader. "Is it true?" the old woman asked. Immediately, the subject of today's private meeting was put forth. Both of their expressions turned grim and serious, with thousands of emotions and memories rushing through their minds. "Yes, the Grandmaster is in New Sparta," Katerina confirmed. A cold breeze rang out into the room. Just the mere mention of this name would have brought anger, fear, and anxiety towards any member of the Eternatus Consortium. But for these two, only a serious and focused expression flashed into their eyes. In fact, there was even a hint of zeal into their expression, a steadfast enthusiasm that came less from a place of fear but a place of impatience. "Finally," the old woman muttered. They'd been tracking down this heinous bastard for a while now, to no avail. They spent valuable resources all across the globe hoping they'd catch a glimpse of this guy's name. However, he was too slithery. A shifty knave, the Grandmaster never even lets other people know his name so as to prevent anyone from tracking him down. For a man who loved the shadows and isolation, who would have thought that they'd find him in New Sparta, where the entire place was bursting with life, conversation, and strife? "Do not let him know we're onto his tail," the old woman commanded. "He'll run away, guaranteed." Keep doing what you've been doing in New Sparta and pretend as if you don't even know he's there." "What?" Katerina's visceral outburst brought her nascent spirit armor manifesting around her. But despite being encompassed by this tangible pressure, the old woman remained unfazed. Not a single hair follicle of hers shivered. "Katerina, listen to me. You cannot defeat him alone. We have to gather all of our forces in New Sparta, and only then will we have a chance at finally laying our vendetta to rest. Let our agents do the work." "No. I'll search for him myself," Katerina insisted. "I can't just dawdle while knowing he's out there somewhere, just mere inches away from me." The old woman sighed, her eyes gazing at the conspicuous diamond armor manifested around Katerina. "Your ability power is the opposite of what we need. He'll be able to catch a glimpse of your reflection from halfway across the world. You do not have the necessary skills to spy against him especially. We have a lot of agents capable of doing this job better than you. Let them." Katerina's nose was flared, still insisting on her own way. The old woman then walked over towards her and patted her shoulders. "You're not the only one with a score to settle," she said. "The Grandmaster wasn't just her enemy. It was the entire consortium's." The old woman walked past Katerina, about to exit this isolated dimensional plane, when Katerina spoke up. "Wait, that's not the only reason why I called you here today." This certainly caught the old woman's attention. "I found out the reason why Father activated his failsafe," she admitted. With a single eyebrow raised, the old woman turned around and faced Katerina with an expectant gaze. "What did he find out? It may help us in bringing your father out of his coma. It's about unity, or more importantly, who has it." Katerina then began to explain the details of what Michael told her in the drone. His power to control all 8 mana elements, his skill that allowed him to awaken other people's talents, and as well as his feat of killing the Grandmaster's nascent piece. The old woman's expression went from mild shock to complete and utter disbelief. The story of a golden-haired boy doing all of those things were truly far-fetched to be in the realm of possibility. At first, a slight chuckle burst out of the old woman. Katerina must have been exaggerating, right? But as Katerina's story came to an end, and there was no hint of humor in her countenance, the old woman quickly turned silent. Katerina was no liar either. She may have had a brief stint in becoming a problem child during her earlier years, but she would never blatantly lie about something this absurd, especially when it came to the Grandmaster. The old woman paced back and forth, her eyebrows furrowed as she debated on whether she should believe it or not. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Katerina said decisively. "I have witnessed it myself. He cured that elf child's cursed Dowheart. Prismatic light came out of his hands. It can't be anything other than unity." It wasn't that she didn't trust Katerina, but this matter was simply too important to be dismissed with no evidence. The ramifications of such a miraculous power would certainly shake the very foundations of the world. An elf awakening a talent? Not a demi-human with no Dowheart, but a genuine beastfolk. This was simply too earth-shattering. "It's good that you brought this to my attention," the old woman said. "But this should be kept a secret for as long as possible." Katerina was surprised. "I would have thought you would push for his permanent addition to the consortium." The old woman nodded. "Yes, the power that he wields, if true, will shift the scales of war towards our direction significantly. But it's too much. If the ersatz find out that there was someone who can bring the power of the ancient era into our present, then they do whatever it takes to destroy him." This grim and foreboding thought made Katerina worried. "What should we do?" "You do nothing. For now, the fact that he has remained unknown for this long means that the ersatz won't find out about him unless we give him special attention. Keep him close, but from a distance. Michael still remains unknown from the rest of the world. If there were any rumors about him, they only remained as such. After all, the extent of his power was too far-fetched to be believed. The ersatz certainly thought so, given that they haven't found out about him. We will be deploying most of our forces in New Sparta soon, so whatever they are doing there, we will be there to stop it." The old woman glanced at Katerina and saw that she was still not assured. Do not worry. I will be in New Sparta myself, said the old woman. This greatly surprised Katerina. Her presence in New Sparta would certainly deter any major moves from the ersatz. Just her name alone would make them quiver in fear, forcing them into the squalid hiding holes they call their strongholds. I shall await for you in New Sparta. Katerina kneeled. The old woman nodded. I'll be finishing up some business here, making some excuses to justify my coming there. Katerina nodded, before turning around and extending her hand, about to create another rift in the spatial dimension. Oh, and Katerina, it would be nice if we had some dinner once in a while, the old woman said warmly. Katerina smiled. Yes, Miss Zier. Michael flew through the slew of organic, powdery confetti flying through the skyline of the elven village, and eventually arrived on the front steps of Lady Farron's quaint cabin. With a knock on the door, he let himself in and saw a busy elf surrounded by even more busy bodies. As soon as the door creaked open, they turned their heads towards his direction. Their eyes glistened with awe and adoration as they recognized his face. Sir Keo, you've awoken. Our hero. Michael was once again besieged by the elves on all sides. They became so rowdy at his presence that he could barely even understand what they were talking about. They talked over each other like a bunch of small birds chirping for another worm. Okay, settle down, Lady Farron commanded. I'll handle this. She forcefully pushed the crowd of overly enthusiastic elves out of her house, leaving her alone with Michael. Finally, they could both heave a sigh of relief. What was that? Lady Farron chuckled. They're just fans of yours. The circumstances of yesterday's turmoil have been spread throughout the elven circle. Now, they're treating you as an important figure akin to the mythical heroes of old. Lyra is a beloved member of this community. The fact that you rescued her from a fate of doom is enough to earn adoration from us elves. Now, this brings me to my question. What happens with Lyra now? Lyra was saved. That was a fact that all elves had gotten to know after these past few hours. But the circumstances, or more importantly the extent, of her rescue wasn't exactly common knowledge. Only Lyra, Lady Farron, Michael, and Katerina knew of what really happened that night. For most elves, they simply thought that Michael was a heroic figure who unfettered Lyra from the evil vandals who dared to kidnap her. They never knew about the fact that Lyra's Tao heart curse had resurfaced. They thought that she had already been cured by the compound bow. So, no one was privy to the fact that Lyra's curse was cured due to an awakening of her talent, something that was thought of to be impossible by normal standards. She has a talent now? Just like humans? Is she no longer a beast folk? Michael was hesitant to answer that. After all, even he didn't even know how to explain this situation because this was the first time this had ever happened. To be honest, I don't know. But I am sure that she has a talent. An image flashed back into his mind. A set of bold text that appeared in his vision the moment that he awakened Lyra's talent. SSS class Divine Trickster. That was Lyra's talent. Those few words gave credence to the fact that Lyra was no longer just a beast folk. But she also wasn't a human either. She was a combination of both, something that transcended the two categories. The exact meaning of this, Michael didn't know. After all, having a talent meant that a person was able to awaken a diva if they became a magnetic. This was the reason why only humans became magnetics. Only they had talents to awaken. Demi-humans and beast folks had none. It was only when Michael awakened the talents of a beast folk would they be able to awaken their divas, like the dragonborn siblings. But the beast folks were different. Unlike the demi-humans, they already had a way to access ability power without manifesting a diva. They had a Tao heart, allowing their bodies to possess the power of a magnetic without a talent. The fact that Lyra, a beast folk, now had a talent was simply unheard of, until now. Would Lyra manifest a diva? If so, would it interfere with the natural powers inside her Tao heart? Michael had no idea. How would she increase her cultivation? Would she need to obtain Godforge pieces like all magnetics? Or would she only need to stimulate her Tao heart for it to grow? There were way too many unknown variables in this situation. I'm just worried for her. I don't want her to feel isolated even more than before, Lady Farron muttered. Don't worry, Michael assured. She's not alone. What do you mean? Michael smiled. What, you don't think Lyra's the only one who had a cursed Tao heart, right? Had. There's this mermaid girl who was also cured from her curse. Lady Farron's eyes widened with hope. Really? Yes. I've already linked the two together so that they have each other to talk to. That's great. Michael even had an idea about creating a school meant for cursed childs like Lyra and Nixie, where they could interact with each other and grow their talents in a safe and free environment. Now that Michael knew that cursed Tao hearts were an indication of extreme talent, he was more willing to help them and recruit them over to his side. Speaking of which, I need to visit Nixie soon. Maybe I'll see if I can awaken her talent. There was no reason to think that Lyra was the only cursed child to have a potential for talent. Perhaps, Nixie simply didn't have the proper requirements in order for her to manifest a talent. For example, Lyra showed great signs of recovery after being in contact with a mithril artifact. Perhaps that was what Nixie was missing. Maybe if she held a weapon that she could call her own, she'd also be able to manifest a talent. Hopefully, some company will galvanize that recalcitrant kid into practicing her compound bow for a change, Lady Farron yearned. Then, Lady Farron took out her compound bow and caressed its metallic surface. The combination of dynamic and modern energy of the bow and the ancient stalwart aura of the darkwood made from some amazing harmony of power. But maybe I'm just projecting. It's not Lyra's responsibility to become stronger. It's ours. If I hadn't hoarded the darkwood in a vault and instead empowered my army using it, then those vandals wouldn't have even been able to set foot in our village without getting shot down. So, the fact that you can supply darkwood for us in a consistent manner will be greatly appreciated. Michael nodded, before pointing at the compound bow. You know, if you want, I can add in an order of compound bows with the darkwood. Lady Farron stopped and stared at Michael. Are you serious? Yeah. Like I told you before, I have lots of spare compound bows back in the nation. I could even deliver complete compound bows and darkwood already installed inside it. She was shell-shocked to hear Michael's proposition. Ahem, of course, it's going to be hard to produce. Michael coughed awkwardly, implying his need for a generous offer. Lady Farron immediately knew what he wanted. If you can deliver those weapons to us, then I can offer you 500,000 sand for each one. Michael's greedy eyes flashed as soon as he heard that. 500,000. The darkwood alone was worth 200,000 sand. And if he added in the mithril needed to create the compound bow, which he estimated to also be 200,000 sand, then that meant that he got an extra 100 KSD from this transaction. This was an amazing deal. If he could deliver 8 compound bows plus darkwood to the elves, this would net him 4 million sand each month. And if he ever upgraded his capacity on the isolated rooms, he could grow that number even further. Deal. Michael emphatically agreed. It was a win-win for both parties. Michael enriched himself with more sand, and the elves armed themselves with the best bows in existence. This is great. Let us. Just as Lady Farron was about to shake Michael's hands, the door suddenly burst open as a menagerie of elves stumbled through. They had been pushing through the door so much that its hinges broke entirely. I'm sorry, Lady Farron, but we just have to ask one question to Sir Keo. The group of inquisitive elves picked themselves up from the ground and slowly approached Michael. Sir Keo, is it true that the reason why you were able to find Lyra is because of this thing called a phone? Michael looked at the expectant eyes on the elves and answered, yeah. Then, he reached into his pockets and presented them with his own phone. With the real thing right in front of their very eyes, the elves immediately burst into excitement and ardent zeal. I can't believe there's an object with such magical properties. It can capture the scenery of something with an even better quality than paintings. And it can communicate with others at such long distances. Even without using magic or Tao heart. Can we have one? Lady Farron immediately pushed the group of strange phone enthusiasts out of her room. Okay, now, don't get too excited. This object is extremely rare. But Michael stopped her with a hand. Then, he turned to the zealous elves with a glint in his eyes. You can get one. For a price. For the measly little price of 10,000 sand dollars. Anyone could buy a miraculous metal brick that can communicate across vast distances, capture scenery with complete accuracy, and other such amenities. Who wouldn't want to buy it? The elves certainly did. They sumptuously ordered 100 phones without blinking. In truth, they wanted to buy thousands of phones for all the elves in the village, but Michael limited them to only 1,000. He still didn't have a reliable way of mass-producing phones, so he didn't want to bite off more than he could chew. Still, this was another $1,000,000 sand dollars in his pocket. After counting the sand dollars now in his inventory, Michael was glad to know that he had about 3.3 million SD now. He couldn't wait to spend it all on upgrades. Speaking of which, the drone upgrade shop has probably refreshed all of its items. I should visit it soon. But that was for later once he exchanged it for Sue drops. I'll only be able to deliver the phones in a few weeks, Michael said to Lady Farron. But instead of a response, the only thing he could hear was the clicking of buttons. Lady Farron was too absorbed in the phone in her hands, furiously texting and taking pictures of everything inside her quaint little bungalow house. If Lyra was here to see this, she'd feel indignant. She was getting scolded exactly for this reason. Yet Lady Farron was doing it herself. Ahem. Oh, oops, sorry. It's just that this phone is too amazing. Can I really order a case of this beer and have it delivered in a few days? And I can see the location of anyone with a phone? I'll finally be able to track that rowdy little child wherever she goes. Knowing Lyra's ability to weave around technology, the little girl would probably find a way to turn off her location sharing services. I know now more than ever that an alliance between our groups is the best decision I have made. In return for all you have given us, I will make sure that you obtain that antique from Romeo, Farron said decisively. And with a big sigh, she continued, if the antique is that important to you, then I'll relent to Romeo's request. Michael shook his head. You don't have to accept his advances just for this. No, it's fine. An alliance with a draconian will take the elves into the next level. Perhaps the children we sire will become transcendent. Even in elven terms, she was getting up there in age. Ha! She nodded. Yes. He's been saying that he wants my bloodline for quite some time now. Michael staggered after he heard those words. What if she was misunderstanding Romeo's words? What if the bloodline he was talking about was the elves' ancestor, not their progeny? He says he wants your bloodline? Michael asked on the brink of a realization. Yes. That's what's written on his letters. What if he means the opposite? What if he wants the blood of the ancient humans? It made total sense. The antique always tested the blood of anyone who touched it. Those who failed will be refused entrance to its inheritance. But those who had the prerequisite blood will be granted access to the obelisk. Michael was transported into the obelisk thanks to his unique power, unity and all that. Aside from him, no one else could enter, except for the ancient humans, the very people who bestowed an inheritance into the antique in the first place. Memories flashed into his mind, showing him the sundry stone statues that the elves kept in their garden. According to elven myth, they had the closest connection back to the ancient humans. They had the last vestige of their bloodlines. If that were true, then this was what Romeo would need to enter the antique. Is that true? Lady Farron asked in disbelief. He wants our blood for the antique? Michael nodded. I think so. It's the only thing that makes sense. But, why me? He could have chosen any other elf if he wanted our bloodline. He wasn't sure about that yet. Perhaps Lady Farron was ostensibly only a normal elf, but in truth actually had a secret ancestry that led back to the ancient humans. Of course, that was still only a wild conjecture with no evidence. He had to take that with a grain of salt. I don't know, but I do know that he needs your blood. Lady Farron paced back and forth. What should I do then? Michael didn't know. Romeo didn't seem like a bad guy. If he were truly that desperate to extort blood out of Lady Farron, then he would have done so already. The power of a draconian was nothing to scoff at. Not only that, but they weren't even sure that his guess was correct. Perhaps the guy really was just besotted by Lady Farron's elven beauty. Let's just wait until Katerina comes back. Then we can schedule a meeting with the guy. This was the best course of action. Lady Farron seemed okay with that, and soon excused herself out of the room. She still had a lot of things to deal with in the village, like increasing defenses to make sure that never happened again and other stuff. This left Michael alone to ponder his next move. He looked at his phone and saw a message that was already a day old. Message from Lupin. Heya! When you coming back? The lunar celebrations are already a go-go. You don't want to miss it. This was the message that he got before Lyra took his phone from him. He just didn't have the time to reply because of the hectic hours of everything that happened. I should go there now, but he just couldn't help but let his curiosity get the better of him. With this much money, he wondered what kind of upgrades he could buy with his drone. Michael closed his eyes and opened the drone upgrade shop. Immediately, a semi-translucent 3D structure of the drone appeared in his vision. Mithril artifact. Drone. Spirit of old. 0 drops. Expansion. Drones. Mini drone equals 1. Pocket dimension. 8 rooms. Expansion equals 1 plus. New rooms equals 12 plus. Allies. Fudge. Shiina. Jaku. Amisu. Michael furrowed his brows, completely confused at what he was looking at. Chat JK5? Where are the next upgrades? It looked like all the options were purged from the store, aside from the ones that could still be purchased continuously. The option to upgrade the drone's camera, the weapons, the frame, propellers, everything. This bummed him out. He was really looking forward to splurging on upgrades now that he had a lot of sand dollars to spare. Please check closely at the bottom of the screen. ChatJK5 advised like a disappointed teacher. He quickly rummaged through the options once again before he finally landed on a new window sitting perfectly on the footnote of the page. This one was completely different in style and presentation than the last upgrade windows. It was austere, with the majority of the page being a white background. Meanwhile, the font of the texts gave off a certain sense of familiarity, reliability, and grandness / It reminded him of a certain website back in his previous life, so much so that he was certain that there would be a lot of copyright problems that ChatJK5 would have to face because of this design. He didn't even have to ask her how this new setup was going to work. After all, this Windows idiosyncratic flair couldn't be mistaken for anything else. Drone Emporium. Search. That's right. This new window looked eerily similar to a search engine back in his previous life. Not just any search engine, but one of the biggest companies on Earth that was owned by someone who was once called as the richest man on Earth. To be exact, this was a product search engine which looked like it prided itself with same-day deliveries. ChatJK5. How is this even possible? How will I even make an upgrade with my drone? Would you like to try it out? Michael would like to, but in truth he didn't know what to write. After all, there were way too many options. He was currently paralyzed by the amount of choices that he could make with this search engine. And as if ChatJK5 heard his words, there was suddenly a new pop-up notification on the screen. Congratulations for your first visit to the Drone Emporium. You have been credited with a 50% off coupon on your first purchase. You have logged into the Drone Emporium for the first day, unlocking a free instant delivery ticket. Log in for consecutive days to earn more rewards. Michael's vision was inundated with gaudy and flashy pop-up windows that certainly took his attention. There were even some confetti and colorful lights that flew towards him like a 3D effect, startling him. Whoa! After shaking off his shock, he began to read the notification he got. 50% off coupon? Instant delivery ticket? What do these mean? Would you like a tutorial for the Drone Emporium? Yes, please. At first, he thought he knew what this new window entailed. But as it turned out, he was dead wrong. AM*Zon didn't have these kinds of pop-up sign-in rewards. It sounded more like the other product search engine. The whole screen dimmed before ChatJK5 automatically zoomed the picture towards the search bar. It blinked before a pair of text appeared linking towards it. This is a search engine. This is where you're going to input any item that you would like to build. For now, Please input any kind of item you wish. Any item? Can it be a baseball bat? He asked jokingly. But suddenly, the whole screen refreshed as a set of rows appeared in the Emporium window. Wooden baseball bat, metal baseball bat, candy cane bat, realistic toy bat with moving wings, vampire bat action figure. Multitudes of sundry items that related to the words baseball bat appeared in the window. Some of these weren't even an actual bat. They just had a tenuous relationship with the word bat, even though they were completely different items. What are these? How are these going to be upgrades for my drone? Please pick one option. ChatJK5 advised. Still confused, he picked the option realistic toy bat with moving wings just because of how ridiculous it sounded. Then the screen changed once again. This time, it showed a picture of the item in clear view at the top, with a small description at the bottom. It was just a simple toy bat, with red eyes, fangs on its mouth, and a long wingspan that wrapped around its body. On the bottom, it said, realistic toy bat with moving wings. This is a perfect gift to give during the holidays. It perfectly represents the anatomy of the famous winged mammal, allowing for better study. Okay, so it's really just a toy? Then he scrolled downwards, finally seeing its price. Price: 2 mini drones. Delivery time: 24 hours. 2 mini drones for its price? Huh. Thankfully, ChatJK5 was here to explain. The products you see in the Emporium are things that the mini drones can transform into. For example, this item that you chose will need 2 mini drones for it to be completed. Once it has become the item that you purchased, it will perfectly mimic the product's specifications and measurements. You currently have a 50% discount, bringing down the price of the item to only 1 mini drone. With an instant delivery ticket, this item will be delivered at your earliest convenience. Would you like to purchase this? Huh? Why would I spend 2 mini drones to create something as useless as a toy bat? That seems completely useless. There was no way he would get rid of 2 mini drones in order to create a simple toy. In fact, he wouldn't even do that for a metal bat. All of those things in the search bar were items that he could create all on his own, with normal materials that didn't include mini drones. But there's no way that this new shop would just give me normal items. Perhaps it wasn't the items that were lacking. Perhaps it was his imagination. He then looked at the search bar and completely erased his input, replacing it with something a little bit more useful. You say that I can search for any item, right? Well, how about this? With a single thought, he entered his new item into the search bar, prompting the whole page to turn white as it refreshed its screen. Then, one by one, rows of familiar and intimidating names appeared in his vision. Each one was esoterically named and could only be understood by true connoisseurs. Search: handguns, Glock 19, Sig Sauer P320, Beretta 92 FS, Colt 1911. The Drone Emporium gave him a list of popular handguns back in his previous life, some of which even he was familiar with. So I can order guns too, just to see what it was like. He picked the Glock 19 option. It wasn't long before multiple images showed up on the upper part of the page, showing the different facets of the Glock 19. The Glock 19 is a popular semi-automatic pistol that is famed for its versatility and price: 1 mini drone. Delivery time: 2 hours. According to the incisive description and detailed plethora of pictures shown on the page, this gun perfectly replicated the one in his previous life, with nothing lacking nor any innovations. In short, there was no reason for him to buy this gun. After all, he could easily make it on his own without having to spend a single mini drone. So how will this work, ChatJK5? Will my mini drone really become a gun if I purchase this? Yes. The mini drone that you purchase will transform its very structure to conform to the blueprints of the item. In this case, the mini drone will become a functional gun that can shoot normal 9mm bullets. Will the gun retain the properties of the drone? Some of it, yes. The gun will have the same durability as a mini drone. This was the only thing that he could consider as a positive change. The gun will basically be made out of mithril, which is the strongest and most durable material known to man. However, this would still be stupid purchase all in all. How about other features I purchased before? It will lose the upgrades like invisibility, unity gun, inventory, and other such things because the item you purchased doesn't have those capabilities. This was even more reason for him not to purchase anything from the Emporium. Not only that, but he saw that the gun would need bullets, which he could either make himself or purchase from the Emporium. 9mm bullet cartridge. Cost: 1 mini drone. Delivery time: 1 hour. Michael wanted to exit out of the Emporium out of disappointment. He wouldn't consider buying any of these items even if he had $1 billion sand to spare. Sure, those mithril bullets sounded useful, but it was still a waste of mini drones. Each one cost 10,000 sand. Mind you, I won't be purchasing any. Just as he was in the middle of his thoughts, he suddenly remembered something. ChatJK5's previous words echoed in his mind. It will lose the upgrades like invisibility, unity gun, inventory, and other such things because the item you purchased doesn't have those capabilities. The item would lose those upgrades because they don't have those capabilities, but what if they do? With this realization, he quickly went towards the search bar to test out his new hypothesis. But instead of scrubbing his previous input, he added a few words instead. Search: handgun, unity powered. With those words, the screen refreshed and showed him an entirely new set of items. Unity Glock 19. Unity Desert Eagle. Unity Beretta. He clicked on the Unity Glock 19, and the page showed him a similar picture of the semi-automatic pistol. But now, there was a tinge of prismatic lining along its barrel, like a customized sticker that indicated its uniqueness. This variant of the Glock 19 uses Unity as its bullets. As a semi-automatic gun, the Unity bullets will fire with a fast action. Price: 5 mini drones. Delivery time: 30 hours. Just as he thought, the Emporium now gave him a list of guns that used Unity as its bullets. His hypothesis was correct. As it turned out, this drone Emporium wasn't limited by items from his previous life. It was only limited by his imagination. As long as he could think of it, then there was probably an item he could purchase from the Emporium. To test this out even further, he inputted a new variant of the pistol. Search: handgun, unity powered, invisibility, silenced. And just as he thought, the Emporium gave him a list of products that fit that description exactly. Disappearing silenced Unity Glock 19. Price: 8 mini drones. Delivery time: 40 hours. Based on the increasing price and delivery time, it seemed that the more complex the item, the more was required to create it. Now that he figured out the secret to maximize the potential of the drone Emporium, Michael decided to go all out. He wanted to input something that would upgrade a simple gun into something that went above and beyond its original structure and intention. Search: a handgun that uses Unity as its bullet. It has enough firepower to kill even a nascent spirit cultivator with a single shot. Michael watched as the screen flashed white, with a simple loading cursor rotating in the middle of the window. It took ChatJK5 almost half a minute before it could finally give out a result. The screen refreshed, showing a single row below the search bar. Nascent Godkiller of the Seven Seas. Nascent Godkiller of the Seven Seas. Michael stared at the screen with shock and trepidation in his eyes. Such a breathtaking title. Just reading through its name gave him the image of an immortal soaring through the turbulent ocean with his floating sword, undaunted by the multitudes of horrifying, godlike, Lovecraftian monsters in front of him. At first, he thought that the drone Emporium wouldn't give out any results. After all, the criteria he set was far too fantastical to be achieved. And in truth, he wasn't really expecting any product that matched his description. He just wanted to test out the limits of the search engine. But to his surprise, the Emporium actually gave him a product. Nascent Godkiller. He stared at the words, actually a little bit afraid of clicking through it. The name sounded too grand, too divine for him to purchase through the Emporium. But after clearing his throat with a hearty inhale, he touched the mythical item. Nascent Godkiller of the Seven Seas. The image of a handgun appeared on the top window. But unlike the previous items, this one was very special. First of all, This gun had its own distinctive background that was animated. It looked like one of those extremely rare video game items that only had a 0.5% chance of spawning. The gun itself was sitting atop a billowing group of clouds effused with a teal-colored ethereal light. Its barrel was made up of turbulent waves of blood, with images of ghastly souls shouting and screaming upwards. Its handle, on the other hand, was filled with golden swords, axes, spears, and every other type of weapon. Each one pointed towards the tormented souls trapped in the gun's barrel. Overall, the flares and designs of this gun painted the image of a weapon that had its fair share of casualties, both mortal and divine alike. Michael had no doubt that this weapon could kill even a nascent spirit cultivator in one shot. Even from this image shown, he could feel a tangible conflation of unity and ability power coming out of the gun's surface. He had a feeling that this gun would claim mortals' lives just from a single glance. The nascent godkiller of the seven seas is a handgun with consummate power of the divine. Its capabilities are unfettered by mortal reasoning, allowing it to destroy nascent spirits with a single shot. Even those on the brink of reaching godhood cannot escape the reaping of their souls. The nascent godkiller of the seven seas is a handgun with consummate power of the divine. Its capabilities are unfettered by mortal reasoning, allowing it to destroy nascent spirits with a single shot. Even those on the brink of reaching godhood cannot escape the reaping of their souls. Michael took a deep breath. The weapon's description was an apt realization of what he was looking for. A true godkiller. He couldn't believe that his drone emporium could even come up with such a terrifying weapon. This was beyond what he even thought was possible. It broke the rules of reality. After all, if the capabilities of this weapon was true, then it was a viable weapon that could kill even the Grandmaster himself. Price: 1 million mini drones. Delivery time: 365 days. Immediately, his thoughts of gunning down the strongholds of ersatz by himself were thrown out the window. Of course, such a powerful weapon required an even greater price. 1 million mini drones? Are you kidding me? It would take him a total of 10 billion sand dollars to purchase. He chuckled. Even with his current rate of progress, it would take him years, if not decades, to amass even a single billion sand dollars, let alone 10. It makes sense. This is essentially a one-hit kill gun. It kind of made him a little bit mad that ChatJK5 would show him such a tantalizing product. There was no possible way for him to earn that much money. Michael sighed. I guess it's just going to be a forlorn dream for the time being. You seem to be forgetting something, ChatJK5 reminded him. Then, a slight glint appeared on the top right corner of the screen. Just like the popular product search engine from his previous world, the Drone Emporium also had tabs on its window to show the different features of the page. The first icon showed a shopping cart, which he guessed to be the page to show the items he wanted to buy. Next to that were two other icons. The first one showed an icon of a ticket with a percentage sign written in the middle, while the other one had an icon of a truck cruising through the road. ChatJK5 highlighted those two icons and automatically clicked it for him. Written on those windows were the login rewards he obtained previously. 50% discount. Instant delivery. If he used this coupon, then he could drop down the price of the gun to only 500,000 mini drones. This was a huge discount that he would definitely take advantage of. Now, he'd only need 5 billion sand dollars to obtain a god-killing firearm in his hands, which was still a lot, but definitely doable within a time frame of a couple of years. I'll definitely save this coupon for this gun. Michael definitely underestimated the coupons that the Emporium gave him. But after seeing the products that he could purchase, he would definitely keep an eye out for more. ChatJK5, I have more sign-in bonuses, right? Correct. If you sign in for multiple days, you will be awarded with various coupons and rewards. She didn't say what kind of rewards he would receive, but there were definitely discount coupons somewhere around there. Can I stack coupons? Negative. Each item can only have one discount and one delivery-free ticket. This was a shame, but understandable. Now, if he found a better coupon somewhere along the line, he would save that one up for the Godkiller gun. Meanwhile, he'd use the rest of the coupons to buy the other items in the Emporium. He'd seriously be wasting the potential of the product search engine if he simply saved up all of his money for the Godkiller gun. The possibilities were endless. Michael immediately teleported himself back to the new Sparta Lake, finding himself at the wooden docks. As soon as he arrived, he bent down and splashed his hands on the surface, indicating to Princess Octavia and the others about his intention to return to the sunken ship. And while he was waiting for their response, his phone buzzed as a new notification arrived from a familiar number. Message from Lupin. Where you at, man? The lunar celebrations are going to start officially. It seemed that while he was away, things had progressed in the werewolf tribes. According to Chief Lupin, during the start of the lunar celebrations, all of the tribes would gather at a single location to show their respects to both their fellow tribes and the moon itself. Because of this event's importance, the different powers in New Sparta would also find themselves attending the ceremony. This included the different beast folks in the region as well as the human factions that they were allied with. This would give the chance for all parties to mingle, discuss, and perhaps size each other up from the competition that was about to come. It would be extremely helpful for Michael to be there to witness the ceremony firsthand. However, sorry, I won't be there during the ceremony. Don't worry. Shiina will fill me in on everything that happens. I have something important to do. His reply was sent just at the same time as the cephalopod merman arrived at the surface with a bubble for him to descend with. Welcome, Sir Kyo. To what do we owe the pleasure? Michael smiled. I'm here to do what I've promised. I'm here to install another filter. That was right. The busy thing that would occupy him for a full day and cause him to miss the opening ceremony of the lunar celebrations was for the filter that Princess Octavia ordered. Thanks to your wondrous item, fishes and corals have been growing at an astonishing rate. We feel the waters getting clearer and clearer. That's right. We no longer feel any sickness from the pollution. But is this all right? Princess Octavia doesn't want you to feel burdened with creating the filters during your busy time. You can do them at any time you're free. Michael stopped him with a magnanimous-looking smile. Oh, no worries. It's my pleasure. He wasn't lying. After all, installing another filter would net him a whopping 1 million sand dollars. Right now, this was the fastest way that he could earn money. Sure, it was tedious and laborious, taking him a whole day's worth of work, but it was worth it in the end. Selling phones would definitely be easier and faster, but he was hesitant to take more orders when he hadn't even delivered most of the shipment. He was desperate for money, but not enough for him to breach his moral standards. However, building the next filter was something that benefited both him and the merman immediately. Princess Octavia would get to expand her borders, and he'd be able to get more money to buy mini-drones. It was win-win. Soon, he arrived back in the comfort of the sunken ship. A lot has changed since the last time he was here. Instead of seeing the gaunt and derelict remains of a sunken ship wrecked in half at the bottom of the lake, he now saw a bustling collection of sea life and marine animals swimming around happily. Bioluminescent and animated corals now grew about 100 meters in radius around the sunken ship, which was previously completely desolate of life. Schools of magically mutated fish scampered happily along the sea floor, their species varied and distinct from one another. With the surrounding waters of the sunken ship now effused with mana, any and all kinds of life were attracted to live in Princess Octavia's territory. In fact, he even saw a few simple constructed dwellings around the ship, made out of corals, solidified sand, and seaweed. Living inside these huts were mermen of kinds he had yet to see before. Their species were unlike the ones living in Princess Octavia's territory. In short, they weren't cephalopods or invertebrates. They were mammals. Mermen with the conflated anatomy of humans and dolphins lived simply in the outskirts of the sunken ship, showing progress in the octopus princess' political aspirations. She was wresting public support from her brother and slowly growing hers. Michael! Swimming out of the wrecked sunken ship was a red-haired mermaid with a warm, welcoming look on her face. Hey, Serena! The mermaid princess swam happily around Michael, her tail wagging like a puppy's. What are you here for? Isn't the lunar celebrations about to start? As an honorary Rebornian, She knew about Michael's alliance with the Brownbloods. Yeah, but I wanted to build the filter first. And it's not like I'll miss much. I'm always watching it through this. He showed her his phone, its screen showing the video live streaming app already opened. Currently playing on the phone was shaky cam footage of Shiina and the other Dragonborns sitting on ascending steps of chairs much like the viewing deck of a coliseum. They were currently surrounded by brown-blood werewolves, who looked to be nervous compared to the lackadaisical and flippant attitudes of the Rebornians. "Oh, hey Miss Serena," Zion greeted from the phone, his face taking up the entirety of the screen. She waved her hand and greeted him back, before Shiina took control of the camera back and scolded the boy for being too rowdy. "I'm sorry, Lord Michael, Miss Serena. We will do our best to behave and remain inconspicuous. Isn't that right?" Michael felt Shina's cold glare from here. "All right, keep me posted," he said. Then he turned back to Serena. "Anyway, is Princess Octavia here?" She shook her head. "You just missed her. She's actually attending the lunar celebrations, probably just to compete with our brother again." It seemed that the lunar celebrations were truly jam-packed with important people. If $1 million sand dollars weren't on the line, he would have been there to witness it himself. Michael didn't tarry any longer and found a suitable place to set up in. As he discussed with Princess Octavia, the next place he was going to install a filter was quite the territory a few hundreds of meters away from the sunken ship. Now, this doesn't seem the most sensible decision at first. It would look better if the filter was placed adjacent to the sunken ship, so that the combination of both filters would create a larger territory with filtered water. But Princess Octavia chose a place quite a ways away from her territory for only one reason. FOMO. Fear of missing out. Coincidentally, the place of the second filter was directly on the line of sight of the Corallis, Triton's expansive territory. Those who wandered a bit away from the Merman Utopia, as it was called, would suddenly see a new place flourishing with life out in the open waters. This would certainly attract the attention of most mammalian mermen, especially since they were the ones who needed mana-infused water the most. That's where they get their oxygen, after all. Of course, their species had the most trouble adjusting here in the new Sparta Lake. That was why most of them lived in the Corallis, which was manually pumped with magic by Triton in order to make it livable. But even he, the great warm-blooded prince of the deep sea, hasn't been able to fully solve that problem. His pockets bled sand dollars every day just to keep his city afloat. He certainly wouldn't have extra funds to make the outskirts of his territory flourish. That was where the filter came in. Once the citizens of Corallis saw that even the desolate floor of the lake could become livable, then they would be more than willing to migrate towards Octavia's territory, thereby gaining their votes. Okay, let's start. Michael spent the whole day working in the cold, dark waters of the lake installing all the needed systems for the filter. The only thing that gave him company was the ongoing live stream of the lunar celebrations. He couldn't watch it fully, but he did listen in on the conversations. Well, at least the things he could understand. Zion was quite the chatterbox, clouding the conversations happening around them. He didn't mind. Shiina would catch him up to speed later. Anyway, he finished up his work early the next day, finally installing the crystallized Unity shard into the engine. Once the fuel was installed, the machine sputtered into action, sending gusts of mana-infused water all around its surroundings. "It's done," he said to the merman guards. "Amazing, Sir Keo. I can already feel the water starting to get fresher. We will be glad to report this to the princess once she comes back. For now, please follow us back to the sunken ship. Princess Octavia has already prepared your reward ahead of time." Feeling bubbly, pun intended, Michael drifted back to Octavia's territory and found himself staring at another treasure chest. 1 million sand dollars as promised, Sir Keo. With a satisfying click, he pushed the shell lock on the chest, causing its lid to burst backwards. Effervescent bubbles rose from the treasure chest before the clear, tempting sight of sand dollars entered his vision. "Thank you," he said, before receiving the chest with his shadow inventory. Immediately, ChatJK5 flashed a notification detailing his current wealth.
$100, 4 311 523.
Ha 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 ha. Without missing a beat, he immediately went towards Serena's quarters and requested an exchange. With her help, a vortex appeared a few feet above the floor. Its dark, tenebrous tunnel led into a different place entirely, somewhere so deep that even light could not touch its surface. "How much would you like to buy?" Michael smiled. "All of it." With a wave of his hand, a spherical shadow emerged from his feet and rose up in front of him. A similar whirlpool appeared into its surface, causing the sand dollars inside his inventory to radially flow towards the vortex. Tens of thousands of sand dollars were drained from his account each second, all sinking into the endless pit of the vortex. Serena's eyes widened even further as the exchange went way past a few minutes. In the end, all 4.3 million sand dollars were unloaded. And as if mimicking Serena's shock, the vortex itself took at least 5 minutes in complete silence and inactivity. It didn't expect to handle this much money in a single exchange. "This vortex wouldn't scam me, right?" Michael joked. "Ha ha ha. No, I think," Serena awkwardly laughed. Even she didn't know why this exchange was taking this long. Finally, something changed. The vortex suddenly increased in intensity, its revolution becoming more and more turbulent as the seconds passed. The dark, Stygian tunnel that led to another region suddenly bulged, increasing in girth as it began to convulse. This chaotic change in the vortex caused microtremors all around the sunken ship, until after half a minute, everything stopped. Then suddenly, a dark-tinted wine bottle emerged out of the vortex, landing perfectly in Michael's hands. "Wine?" he asked. He turned towards Serena for questions, but saw her jaws wide open in complete shock. That's Father's personal bottle," she shouted, the scales in her tail flickering in shock. "What?" She pointed at the bottle, or more specifically, the label on its surface. Written using some type of premium seaweed and various coral shavings was the words, "Ocean King's Gift of Old." He peered through the dark-tinted bottle. It was hard to see the liquid inside given the opaqueness of the sea glass used, but he could feel it sloshing around as he shook the bottle. It was viscous like oil. There was no mistaking it. This voluminous collection of liquid was none other than the spirit of old, or Sue for short. He'd only ever seen it in drops, so he couldn't quite recognize it the first time. "Wow! So this is 431 drops of Sue." But Serena interjected. "Not just. That's more than 431 drops. That's 500. Michael stopped for a second. "What? How does this have 500 drops?" Perhaps Serena was mistaken. After all, that would be a surplus of 69 drops, which was not a paltry number at all. Michael was pretty sure that there would be wars fought to obtain that much Sue drops. There was no way that the vortex accidentally gave him 500 drops instead of the 431 he purchased. But Serena was absolutely sure. "Look at the label and try to see if there's a hint of octopus ink used in the words." Michael did as he was told, noticing now that a strange, almost magical, sparkling glimmer shined through the black letters. At first, he thought that they were made from sand, but he could sense a faint sense of ability power from these words. "Yeah, and I can almost smell a hint of saltiness from the bottle," he confirmed. "That's my father's personal stamp. This has to be one of his bottles," she insisted. The fact that she knew about this secret font gave credence to her words. But still, it didn't make sense. Why would the Ocean King suddenly give him an excess of Sue drops? "Let me explain. The bottles are part of Father's personal collection of gifts. Valuable items such as iridescent pearls, rare and exotic scales, and other such curios are given out to his friends as a sign of goodwill. Amongst that lineup of gifts is this bottle. It contains 500 drops in total." Michael stared at the bottle in his hands, his face twisted into confusion. He wondered what he did to earn the goodwill of the Ocean King himself. As far as he knew, he'd never even indirectly dealt with the literal ruler of the oceans. "Does he know me?" Serena furrowed her brows, before shaking her head. "Probably not. And before you ask, no. The vortex won't allow Father to peer through to the other side. It only allows the transfer of Sue drops for security purposes. Even she didn't know how or why this happened. The Ocean King was known for his spontaneity, but even this seemed too random. Maybe someone told him about the filter? She considered the thought for a second, before shaking her head. Even if someone here reported back to Atlantis, they'd need to have traveled for a month at least before they reached the bottom of the ocean. It had only been a few days since the first filter was installed, so that wasn't possible. Michael was so stumped by this puzzle that his excitement for the Sudrops were completely buried. Maybe it's because he noticed the frequency, Serena muttered. Frequency? Yes, the frequency in which you exchange for Sudrops. Perhaps he noticed that you are the only person who has been acquiring Sudrops at a commensurate rate. The first time you exchanged only a few drops. Then the next, tens of drops. Now you obtained hundreds. It's not hard to see a pattern. This was the only explanation that seemed reasonable. Father does like to appreciate talent, Serena added. He's rewarding your ability to accrue sand dollars and wants to form a favorable connection with you. If that was true, then his wish was fulfilled. Michael really appreciated the extra 69 drops that the Ocean King generously gave him. If he did that every time he exchanged for drops, then he'd consider the old guy his best friend. Of course, he knew that the Ocean King wasn't doing this out of the goodness of his own heart. No one was that altruistic. It was basically an investment. Perhaps in the future, once they met each other, the Ocean King would cash in this favor. Michael was okay with that. If you see your father, tell him I owe him a keg of beer, he joked. Serena chuckled. I have a feeling he'll like that. Michael returned to the nation of Reborn, back into his own room. On his left hand was the wine bottle containing 500 drops of Su, and on his right was his drone. With ardent excitement filling his eyes, he uncorked the bottle and drenched his drone in the oozing transparent liquid oil. As soon as the spirit of old touched the mithril surface, the nanoparticles that made up its frame began to squirm, as if they were little ants dancing and capering with being bestowed with ambrosia itself. His drone began absorbing the Su drops, which would have been instantaneous if not for the voluminous amount of drops he gave. His drone floated in the air, engulfed in a sphere of Su drops. Even though the whole absorption only took about a minute in total, his excitement made it feel like an hour. After his patience ran out, he grabbed the mithril drone from the air and observed its surface. He watched as the last drop of Su disappeared between the cracks of the nanoparticles, finally completing the process. Upgrades. Mithril artifact. Drone. Spirit of old. 500 drops. Expansion. Michael didn't even hesitate for a second before he purchased 500 mini-drones in an instant. After all, there were no other alternatives. He had nothing else to purchase except for the isolated rooms, which he wasn't yet willing to expand. The Emporium also used mini-drones as its mode of currency. So even if he didn't know what to buy yet, he wouldn't lose anything by getting the drones now. Not only that, but having 500 mini-drones was also an advantage on its own. It was a literal army of mini-drones, all capable of shooting Unity guns at once. With this thought in mind, the drone started to release nanoparticles off of its surface as it began to create all mini-drones at once. ChatJK5. Give it to me straight, he said as he braced himself. How long till the mini-drones are finished? The estimated time of arrival for 500 mini-drones is 11 hours, 59 minutes, and 56 seconds. Michael opened his eyes. That's it? Are you not satisfied with that? I can delay its completion, ChatJK5 threatened. No. Please forgive my words. Oh, generous ChatJK5. He almost prostrated on the ground after hearing such a short time. In all honesty, he was expecting an egregious time frame that spanned from a week to a whole month. After all, the last time that he purchased his 16 mini-drones, it took about 2 days of downtime before everything was processed. Granted, this included the upgrades for the rest of the drone itself, but it was still a pretty long time for only a fraction of what he was purchasing now. But now, creating 500 mini-drones only took 12 hours. It wasn't that he was complaining, but he just couldn't believe it. ChatJK5 usually wasn't this forgiving. Did you say something? Nothing, partner. Just praising you is all. Anyway, he was extremely pleased to know that he just had to wait till nighttime to obtain his promised mini drones. All he had to do was sleep for a little bit, and he'd have 514 mini drones to use in the Emporium. Okay, so I really should just sleep for now. I can't let my mind wander about what to buy in the Emporium. This now became a test of patience for Michael. He just had to sleep, which was easy considering that he was extremely exhausted after laboriously installing the filter. Even with magic, he had to use the good, old-fashioned elbow grease to finish the whole setup. With his eyelids becoming extremely heavy, and a yawn coming up from deep inside his body, Michael dropped down to his bed and closed his eyes. Sleep? Just sleep, he convinced himself. But a few seconds later, his eyes shot open, red streaks on the corner of its white sclera like an addict. He couldn't wait. He just had to see what he could buy with the mini drones. Sitting up on his bed, he looked at the Drone Emporium page, convincing himself that he could control himself. It's just a good use of my time. 12 hours is enough to deliberate on what items I could buy. Yeah, that makes sense. With how busy I'll be because of the lunar celebrations, this is the only time that I can take my time and ruminate about my purchase. I'm just being efficient, that's all. This is just the most sensible course of action. It's not an impulse, no, definitely not. I can control myself. Who says I can't? With that flimsy and tenuous reason that was trying to convince no one, Michael opened up the Emporium. And immediately, a new window opened up in his vision. Congratulations for signing in for the second day. You have acquired a free spin in the Wheel of Fortune. God damn it. Effed. ChatJK5 laughed, amused at his misery. Michael cursed his own impatience. How could he wait another 12 hours after finding out that he got another sign-in bonus? And not only that, but he got a free spin on a lottery wheel, the contents of which he still didn't know, but was sure of its ability to make his 12 hours of wait into a hellish experience. Suddenly, a giant multicolored wheel appeared in front of him, crowding the entire screen. It was grand and striking, gilded with ornate and opulent gold designs that would have attracted even the most ascetic monks in the world. He didn't know if it was because of his own undiagnosed addiction to taking risks or something supernatural within the item itself, but he just couldn't take his eyes off of the Wheel of Fortune. Each slice contained different coupons, most of which ranged from 10% off to 30% off. It must be taken into account that the slices weren't at all equal in sizes. The 10% coupon, for example, took up a large area of the wheel, meaning that there was a large chance that he would receive it once it started spinning. Meanwhile, the better coupons, including the 50% off, only had a very tiny slice compared to most of the options. And as he scanned his gaze through the different prizes of the Wheel of Fortune, his eyes were quickly attracted to a tiny sliver on the surface. It was very thin, almost imperceptible, but its grand aura couldn't be ignored. It was the only piece of the pie that was glowing with an ethereal golden light. He was sure that this must be the grand prize, and before he could take a closer look at the possible treasure he might obtain, the Wheel of Fortune started to spin. The differently colored options blurred into an almost prismatic light, ticking constantly before it started to slow down into a crawl. Tick, 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 tick. Congratulations, you have obtained the 20% discount coupon. The pointer on top of the wheel pointed to a prize that was quite average. It wasn't the worst one he could have gotten, but it also wasn't the one he was hoping for. After awarding him his coupon, the Wheel of Fortune dissipated into mist and disappeared from the page like it was nothing but a mirage. For a few seconds, Michael stared at the blinking search bar on the screen. The fact that he got that free spin just for signing in to the Emporium gave him hope that he could continue spinning the wheel and eventually get the grand prize. He now had even more incentive to sleep and let the next day take over. That way, he could get another sign-in bonus, which hopefully gave him another spin. So, he laid back down on his bed and closed his eyes and really tried to sleep. But he couldn't. His blood was still pumping with adrenaline. Curse me! The next 12 hours were total hell. Michael only had himself to blame. He tried to sleep, really, but found himself unable to quell the ardent fire in his heart. He was too excited about his mini drones. The fact that he had a supreme talent didn't help. After all, it was very easy to use magic to simply get rid of the exhaustion in his body. It was as simple as breathing for him. So even when he tried to let the exhaustion take over his body, he naturally attracted the mana in the air and replenished all of the energy needed by his body. He was therefore stuck in this state for hours on end, unable to do anything about it. Eventually, though, the hours passed and the mini-drones were finally finished. The nanoparticles revolving around the mini-drone had finally returned back to their dormant state, sinking back into the mithril itself. Then it landed back down on the bed. It's finally done, right? Affirmative. Good. Let's start the shopping. However, his excitement was suddenly interjected by a piercing pain that tormented his brain. It felt like millions of little knives were cutting through the neurons inside his mind, mincing and dicing it into multitudes of pieces. He was wrong. This was hell. He was so excited about the Emporium that he completely forgot about the painful side effects of obtaining new mini-drones. His consciousness was being split 500 ways all at the same time, and now he was paying the price. If he had been able to steel himself before it happened, he would have been able to steel himself at least a little bit. Because he let himself be controlled by his base urges, he felt the full brunt of misery. The most exciting part of his day became the very bane of his existence. He already considered the experience of having 15 mini-drones as a horrendous piece of torture he wouldn't want to inflict upon his greatest enemies. But now, it has multiplied 100 times more. He fell down onto the floor, clutching his head in pain. This was the worst pain he'd ever felt. Period. No amount of injury, wound, or laceration would come close. He had a feeling that even if his whole body was eviscerated, the pain he'd feel wouldn't even be a fraction of the pain he was feeling right now. He wanted nothing more than to be rid of this pain. But the worst part was that he couldn't even think of a solution. His mind was being preoccupied with nothing but suffering and agony. Anytime he tried to think of anything other than the sharp, aching pain in his mind, it would quickly get washed away with even more torture. Shall I enact the fail-safe protocol? Your body will be forcefully shut down until the compartmentalization process of the mini-drones is completed. Yes, do it. His vision started to darken, with the sensation in his body slowly turning numb. Finally, the pain was starting to subside. The last vestiges of light he saw in his vision shifted as a violet, squishy blob of slime emerged in front of him. Master! Then, everything went dark. Michael opened his eyes, finding himself staring at the ceiling of his room. He looked down, seeing that his whole body was covered in a warm and cozy blanket. My mind feels clear. His brain no longer felt the noisy, incessant aching pain of 1,000 cuts. It was fresh and clear, as if he'd just awoken from a perfect 8-hour sleep cycle. But my stomach feels a little heavy? Trepidation filled his face, thinking that the pain of compartmentalizing 500 mini-drones had now moved from his brain to his innards. But when he looked down, he saw a bulbous violet slime perched atop his stomach, making a perfect indent on the thick blanket. Fudge slowly arose. Master? Are you finally awake? Oh, it's just you. The little ninja slime pursed his lips. What do you mean by that, Master? I kept you safe while you were passed out. How long was I out? You were unconscious for 4 hours. That didn't seem like a long amount of time, but Michael shuddered thinking that he would have had to endure that incessant torture for 4 more hours. He couldn't even last a full minute. Thanks, Fudge. I did good, right, Master? Fudge asked, snuggling into his arms. Yeah. Michael wasn't expecting any problems since he was passed out in the nation of Reborn, but he didn't want Fudge to feel bad. Then I deserve a reward, right? Master, can you lend me one of those guys? Fudge's amorphous violet slime body suddenly turned into an arrow shape, pointing towards the corner of the room. Standing perfectly straight along the wall like a menagerie of stone statues, Michael saw his Unity clones lined up and ready. I took it upon myself to summon the Unity clones for your protection, ChatJK5 explained. Of course, there was no way she was going to let him be vulnerable without protection, which Michael appreciated. But now it brought about a new problem. Can I get one, Master? Please? Please, Fudge begged. He had purposefully been hiding his Unity clones from Fudge especially for this reason. The ninja slime treated them like exotic toys. They all use ability powers. They're magnetics too, right, Master? As a magnetic himself, Fudge sensed the Godforge pieces in the Unity clones. She's different. She's cool. And she's super-duper powerful too, Fudge said, already jumping above Alpha's head. Michael sighed and got up off his bed. Yes, she is. She has an artifice. He explained everything about the artifice to Fudge, warning the little slime to keep an eye out on anyone that had an unusually cold heart. Oh, so they have an artifice, Fudge nonchalantly mentioned. Michael immediately stood up. What do you mean? It's just that I've been seeing those kinds of guys in New Sparta. They're moving in the shadows and always wearing a dark hood.